Welcome back to Cinemax. Today we are breaking down Project Hail Mary, the 2026 science fiction film, directed by Phil Lord and Christopher Miller, starring Ryan Gosling. This movie is based on the best-selling 2021 novel by Andy Weir, the same author who wrote The Martian. It came out in theaters on March 20th, 2026, and absolutely took the world by storm. It currently sits at 95% on Rotten Tomatoes, made nearly $700 million worldwide, and it is now available to stream on Prime Video. People are calling it one of the greatest science fiction films in years, and honestly, it is hard to disagree. It is funny and emotional and thrilling, and it has one of the greatest alien friendships ever put on screen. So let us go through the entire movie from the very beginning all the way to the ending and break down every single thing that happens. The movie opens in complete darkness and confusion. A man wakes up. He does not know where he is. He does not know who he is. He cannot remember his own name or his own face or a single detail about his own life. He opens his eyes and he is lying in some kind of medical pod inside a small spacecraft. There are two other pods next to his, and both of them contain dead bodies. The ship's automated systems are the only reason he is alive. They woke him up, gave him food, and kept the air going while he was unconscious. If the machines had not been working, he would be dead like the other two. He explores the ship and slowly takes stock of his situation. The spacecraft is small. It has everything needed to sustain one human being for a very long time. There are science instruments and a small lab, and all kinds of equipment that he does not yet understand the purpose of. Outside the windows is nothing but deep black space and stars. Over the next several hours, as he eats and moves around and starts using the ship's systems, fragments of memory begin to come back to him. Scraps at first, just feelings and images with no context. And then, slowly, painfully, the pieces start forming a picture. His name is Ryland Grace. He plays Ryan Gosling. And the story of how he ended up alone in a spacecraft billions of miles from home is one of the most remarkable and terrifying things you will ever hear. The memories come back in pieces throughout the film as flashback sequences, and we are going to tell them all to you now, so the full picture is clear. Ryland Grace was not always a space traveler. In fact, he was about the least likely person you could imagine being sent on an interstellar mission. He started out as a molecular biologist and a serious scientist doing important research on how life could survive in extreme conditions. But at some point, his career went sideways. He had a major falling out with the scientific community over some of his more unconventional ideas, and eventually he ended up leaving research entirely. He became a middle school science teacher in California. He loved teaching, genuinely. He was good at it. He made science fun and real for his students. But in the back of his mind, he always knew he had given up on something bigger. He had walked away from the work that really mattered because it got too hard and too lonely. Then something happened to the sun. Not suddenly. Not in a dramatic explosion. It was quiet and slow, which almost made it worse. Scientists noticed that the sun was getting slightly dimmer. Not by a lot. Not enough for any regular person to notice just by looking up. But the instruments detected it clearly. The sun was losing energy. And when they started looking more carefully, they discovered why. There was something eating it. Microscopic organisms, tiny single-cell creatures smaller than anything anyone had ever seen, were living on the surface of the sun and absorbing its energy. They fed on the light and heat that the sun produced, converting it into fuel for themselves, and in doing so, they were slowly draining the star. Scientists named these organisms astrophage, and the more they looked, the more terrifying the picture became. The astrophage were not just on our sun, they were on every star in the galaxy. Every single one. Stars all across the Milky Way were being slowly dimmed by these creatures. The entire galaxy was getting darker. Every star except one. Tau Ceti, a star about 12 light years from Earth, appeared completely untouched. The astrophage were everywhere else, but somehow Tau Ceti was clean. And if scientists could figure out why, if they could understand what was different about Tau Ceti that the astrophage did not like, they might be able to use that knowledge to stop the astrophage from destroying the sun and killing all life on Earth. The problem was that 12 light years is an incomprehensible distance. Even the fastest spacecraft humanity could build would take decades to get there. A round trip would take a human lifetime. It was essentially a one-way ticket. Anyone sent on this mission was never coming home. This is where a woman named Eva Stratt comes in, played by Sandra Hüller. Eva Stratt was appointed by the governments of the world as the director of a project called Project Hail Mary, humanity's last desperate attempt to save itself. She had essentially unlimited authority and unlimited resources. Whatever she decided needed to happen, happened. No argument, no committee, no delay. If the human race was going to survive this, someone needed to be willing to make brutal decisions, and Eva Stratt was willing. So how did Grace end up on the ship? He had published a paper years earlier with an idea that most of the scientific community laughed off. He had suggested that life, real biological life, might be able to survive in the extreme heat and radiation of a star's corona. Everyone told him he was wrong. He kind of accepted that they were right and moved on with his life. But when the astrophage were discovered, Eva Stratt read his old paper, and she came to find him at his middle school classroom because Ryland Grace was the one scientist on Earth who had actually theorized that microorganisms could live in stars. He understood what astrophage was in a way other scientists were still catching up to. She needed his brain. Grace helped the project. He gave everything he had to figuring out the science. He worked with international teams, ran experiments, contributed crucial insights. He genuinely believed in the work. But when Ava told him what she actually wanted from him, which was for him to be on the ship and take the mission himself, Grace said no. He said it clearly. He said it firmly. He was a teacher. He was not an astronaut. He was not a hero. He did not want to go into deep space on a one-way mission to die 12 light years from home. He had students. He had a life. A modest one, but it was his. He said, absolutely not. Eva Stratt did not accept no. This is the darkest part of Grace's backstory. He was not a volunteer. He was sedated against his will and placed in the medical pod for the journey. The crew of the Hail Mary was supposed to be 3 people, all of whom knew what they were signing up for. But they died in an accident before the launch. And so Ava, faced with losing the mission entirely, made the decision that Grace was too important to leave behind. She put him on the ship without his consent. He has been in that pod in a coma for years, traveling through space toward Tau Ceti. The ship woke him up when it arrived because the systems were designed to revive the crew when they reached their destination. He woke up alone with no memory in an alien star system with 2 dead strangers beside him and the fate of the entire human race on his shoulders. Back in the present on the ship, Grace is still piecing this together when something unexpected happens. The ship's instruments detect another spacecraft nearby. Not far, right there in the Tau Ceti system, and it is moving toward him. Grace does not know whether to be terrified or amazed. On one hand, an unknown vessel approaching him in deep space could be an enormous threat. On the other hand, the fact that there is any vessel at all means something almost too big to comprehend. It means he is not alone in the universe. The other ship makes contact, and what Grace eventually comes face to face with is a creature unlike anything he ever could have imagined. The alien is roughly the size and general shape of a person, maybe a little smaller, but that is where any similarity ends. It has 5 legs arranged symmetrically around its body like a starfish standing upright. Its skin is a hard shell, more like an insect than a mammal. Its face, if you can call it a face, is a cluster of sensory organs and sound-producing tubes. It communicates entirely through sound, through complex tones and harmonics that at first mean absolutely nothing to Grace. Grace names the alien Rocky. He does not know what Rocky calls himself. He does not know what Rocky's species calls itself or where exactly they come from. But Rocky is clearly intelligent, clearly a scientist and engineer of some kind, and clearly, just like Grace, alone. Rocky came from a star system called 40 Eridani. His people, the Iridians, had noticed the same thing that humanity had noticed. Their star was being dimmed by astrophage. They had reached the same conclusion that Tau Ceti held the answer, and they had sent one of their own on the same kind of desperate mission that Earth sent Grace on. 2 civilizations completely unknown to each other sent their best hope to the same star at the same moment in history, and they found each other. The challenge immediately is that they literally cannot share the same space. Rocky breathes ammonia. Grace breathes oxygen. The air that keeps Grace alive would kill Rocky, and the air Rocky breathes would kill Grace. Their ships end up connected through a shared airlock with a transparent barrier between them, and they begin the slow, strange, brilliant process of learning to communicate. This is one of the most wonderful sections of the film, because neither of them has any common language, any shared words or symbols. They have to build one from scratch. Rocky turns out to be an extraordinarily gifted engineer with an instinct for problem solving that Grace finds both impressive and hilarious. Grace is creative and intuitive in ways that frequently surprise Rocky. They are completely different kinds of minds, and they complement each other perfectly. They develop a shared language using sound, partly music and partly mathematics, and it grows slowly into something rich enough to actually have conversations in. The jokes they tell each other, the arguments they get into over different approaches to the same problem, the moments where one of them figures something out and the other one immediately understands why it matters. Every single one of these exchanges is a joy to watch. Rocky never feels like a human in a rubber suit. His way of thinking is genuinely alien. He approaches engineering with a kind of absolute mechanical confidence that Grace sometimes finds intimidating. He struggles to understand certain human emotions and concepts, and Grace's explanations of them occasionally baffle him completely. And yet, underneath all of that difference, both of them recognize something deeply familiar in the other. They are both alone. They are both carrying the hopes of everyone they left behind. They are both doing something terrifying because someone had to. Together, Grace and Rocky investigate Tau Ceti and try to understand why the astrophage has not affected it the way it affected other stars. And what they eventually discover is extraordinary. There is a microorganism living in the Tau Ceti system, something they eventually named Tau Moeba, that eats astrophage. This tiny organism is the natural predator of the astrophage. Wherever astrophage appears in the Tau Ceti system, Tau Moeba consumes it. That is why Tau Ceti is clean. It has its own defense, a biological solution that evolved naturally over millions of years. If they can cultivate Tau Moeba and bring it back, or if they can send the data on how to produce it, they can use it to fight the astrophage attacking Earth's sun, and Rocky's sun as well. Two civilizations can be saved by a tiny single-cell organism that eats the thing killing their stars. This is the breakthrough they have been working toward. This is the answer the mission was sent to find. But nothing in science is ever quite that simple. Grace realizes something alarming. Rocky's spacecraft is built almost entirely from a material called xenonite, which is an extraordinary construction material that the Iridians developed. It is incredibly strong and versatile, and Rocky's people use it for almost everything. But Tau Moeba, the organism they need to save both their worlds, also eats xenonite. If Tau Moeba gets loose and spreads through Rocky's ship, it will consume the xenonite structure of the entire vessel. Rocky's ship would fall apart, his fuel would be destroyed, he would be stranded with no way home and no way to get the solution back to Erid. The very thing they need is also the thing that could doom Rocky. Grace and Rocky work together intensely on this problem. They need to find or breed a strain of Tau Moeba that only eats astrophage and leaves xenonite alone. They run experiments, they fail, they try differently, they argue and recalculate and go at it again. And eventually, through a combination of Grace's biological intuition and Rocky's engineering precision, they develop a solution. A modified strain of Tau Moeba that they can control and cultivate safely. Grace sends the full data back toward Earth using probes, tiny automated spacecraft that will carry the information across the 12 light years between Tau Ceti and the solar system. It will take decades to arrive, but it will get there, and when it does, Earth will have everything it needs to save itself. The mission is complete. Grace has done what he was sent to do, but then a crisis hits. A breach occurs in the fuel bay of the Hail Mary. It causes the ship to spin violently and out of control. The force of the spinning is enormous, and Grace is slammed around inside. Before he can do anything, the impact knocks him unconscious. Rocky is on the ship with Grace at this point, in his protective capsule in his section of the shared airlock, the way he always is when they work together. And when he realizes Grace is unconscious and the ship is in crisis, he makes a decision. He breaks out of his capsule and enters Grace's side of the ship. Rocky's body is not built for oxygen. Grace's atmosphere is toxic to him. Every moment Rocky spends in the oxygen air is doing serious damage to his body. But Rocky does it anyway. He moves through the ship as fast as his 5 legs will carry him, stabilizes things enough to keep Grace alive, and gets him into a safe position. When Grace wakes up days later, he finds Rocky back in his section of the ship. But Rocky is barely moving. He is slumped down and still, and his body has clearly taken enormous damage from the exposure. Grace does not know if Rocky is going to recover. He does not know if Rocky is even alive. This is the most devastating part of the film. Grace sits with Rocky for hours. He talks to him even though he does not know if Rocky can hear him. He breeds enough Talmoba for both of them. He just stays there and waits because there is nothing else he can do. And then, slowly, Rocky starts to come back. When Rocky recovers enough to communicate again, both of them face a question that has been quietly building throughout the whole film. What happens now? The data has been sent. The mission is accomplished. Grace could theoretically try to make it back toward Earth, though the journey would be enormous and the odds against him. Rocky could go back to Erid. They could go their separate ways, 2 beings from opposite ends of the galaxy who found each other by accident and together saved 2 civilizations. Rocky, when he is well enough, does something remarkable. He tells Grace that his people have the technology to build Grace a ship, a proper Iridian ship that could take him home to Earth. He offers to make it happen. He wants Grace to be able to go home. Grace thinks about this. He thinks about Earth, about his classroom, about his students, about everything he left behind. He also thinks about the life he was living before all of this. A man who had given up on big things, a man who had stopped fighting for anything, a teacher who loved his kids but who had quietly stopped believing he mattered in the way he once thought he might. And then he looks at Rocky. He thinks about what it would mean to simply leave, to go back to Earth and live out his days while Rocky travels alone across the light years back to a home that would be saved because of what the 2 of them figured out together. Rocky would be fine. Erid would be fine. Earth would be fine. Everything would be fine without Grace being there for any of it. But Grace would know what he chose, and the choice matters. He tells Rocky he needs time to think. What the film makes clear in this moment is that Grace is not the same person he was when Ava Stratt had to drag him unconscious onto a spacecraft. He woke up with no memory and no idea who he was, and in the process of figuring it out, he became someone better than he was before. The man who said no and walked away from hard things is still inside him. But so is the man who just spent months in deep space working alongside an alien to save 2 civilizations. And that man knows what the right choice is. Grace chooses to stay. He gives up his chance to go home. He sends Rocky back toward Erid, knowing that Rocky's people will figure out what to do with the Talmoba solution and save their star. And he stays behind, 12 light years from Earth with no way back. But the story doesn't end there in sadness, because the Iridians, Rocky's people, come back for him. They rescue him, and they do something extraordinary. On their home planet of Erid, they construct a biodome, a fully sealed, perfectly controlled environment with the exact air pressure and oxygen levels and temperature that a human being needs to survive. Inside this biodome, Grace can actually live, breathe, walk around, exist on an alien world without a suit. And in the final scene of the film, we see what Ryland Grace does with this life he has been given on an alien planet. He teaches. The last image of the movie is Grace inside the biodome, standing at the front of what is clearly a classroom, with young Iridians arranged around him, and he is teaching them science. He is introducing the children of an alien species to human ways of understanding the universe. He is a bridge between 2 civilizations that would never have known each other existed, except for the astrophage that nearly destroyed them both. The classroom at the end mirrors the classroom at the beginning, but everything about it has changed. At the start of the film, Grace was a man who had settled for a smaller life than he once dreamed of. At the end, he is living the biggest life imaginable, completely alone by human standards, impossibly far from home, and completely, genuinely at peace. Now let us talk about what this film is really saying underneath all the science and spectacle. Project Hail Mary is fundamentally a film about reluctant people rising to moments they never asked for. Ryland Grace did not volunteer for this. He was dragged onto that ship against his will. He had already decided he was not the kind of person who saves the world. He was a middle school science teacher who liked his students and his routine, and who had made a quiet peace with being ordinary. But the extraordinary found him anyway, and what the film shows is that ordinary people, when placed in extraordinary situations and given the right kind of company, can become something they never imagined. Rocky is the heart of the film. His friendship with Grace is not sentimental or convenient. They genuinely irritate each other at times. They approach problems so differently that they sometimes cannot understand each other at all. They come from completely different evolutionary histories, completely different societies, completely different ways of experiencing the universe, and yet they choose each other. They choose to work together. They choose to trust each other. And ultimately, one of them chooses to sacrifice his only chance at home for the other. The film is also about what it means to be a teacher. Grace spent years thinking that going from research scientist to middle school classroom was a step down, a retreat. But what teaching actually is, what it really means when done with love, is passing something precious forward to people who will carry it further than you ever could. Grace goes to the farthest point from home a human being has ever gone. And what he does when he gets there is teach. The astrophage and the Talmuba and all the science are real in this movie in the sense that it actually makes sense and holds together and respects your intelligence. But the science is not what the movie is about. The movie is about a man who gave up on himself and got a second chance. And what he does with that second chance is choose someone else over himself. Every single time. That is why the ending hits as hard as it does. Grace does not go home. He should go home. He earned the right to go home. But he looks at his friend and he understands something that he probably could not have understood at the beginning of the film. Home is not always the place you came from. Sometimes home is the person who broke out of their protective capsule into poisonous air to keep you alive while you were unconscious and could not even thank them for it. Project Hail Mary is one of the warmest, funniest, most emotionally generous science fiction films in years. It is the kind of movie that makes you feel good about being human. Not because it pretends humans are perfect, but because it shows what we can do at our best, which is reach across every imaginable difference and find someone worth saving. That is Project Hail Mary, a film about saving the world that is really about finding your place in it. That is it for today's recap here on Cinemax. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss our next video. We will see you in the next one.